Good morning, everyone, and you're very welcome to today's webinar. For those of you who have just logged on in the last few minutes, we have already completed a sound test, and thanks to everyone who helped out with that. First, I want to introduce ourselves. My name is Rachel Hines, and I'm the marketing manager here at Thesaurus Software. Also joining me from Thesaurus Software is Audrey Mooney, who is our customer support manager, Paul Byrne, who is the managing director, and Laura Murphy, who is our Chief HR Officer. I suppose just a quick introduction for those of you who don't know us. Thesaurus Software is the #1 payroll software provider in Ireland, and we have two different payroll software solutions, Thesaurus Payroll Manager and BrightPay. We have been developing payroll software for almost 30 years, and our payroll products are used to process the payroll for over 320,000 businesses across Ireland and the UK. We're absolutely delighted to welcome not just one, but two representatives from the Revenue Commissioners. We are joined by Karen Byrne and Jonathan King, who are Assistant Principal Officers in the Personal Division. I'll be handing over the reins to Karen shortly, who is going to present today's webinar. And then Jonathan will be joining us for the questions and answers section at the end of the webinar. So welcome to you both. It's great to have you joining us for today's webinar. Just to look at the agenda for today's webinar, as I said, I'll shortly be passing you over to Karen, and Karen is going to give us an update on the TWSS reconciliation. I'll come back on again after Karen's presentation to cover what you need to know about the TWSS reconciliation with regards to payroll software. And I also want to discuss practical guidance on how Connect can help your business. Finally, we will have a questions and answers session at the end where we will answer any questions that you may have. If you do have any questions, you can type them into the questions box on your control panel at the side of the screen, and we will try to get through as many questions as possible. And just to note, we do have over 3,000 people registered for today's webinar, so there's a lot of people on and we won't have a chance to answer every single question. The webinar is being recorded and all attendees will receive an email later today with a link to the recording of the webinar. So it's no problem if you do need to leave at any stage. Also in the email later today, there will be a copy of the presentation slides that we are using today, or you can also download the slides right now if you wish on the Handouts tab on your control panel. We will also include some useful documents and additional resources in the follow-up email later today. So I'm now going to pass you over to Karen to begin today's webinar. So just bear with us as we get the screens switched over.
Thanks very much, Rachel, for that introduction. I think I am live there.
Yeah, all good.
A little bit of time, there we go. Okay, thank you very much, and hello to everyone. And again, thanks to Rachel and thanks to the team in Thesaurus for having us here. It's been a while since we've attended one of the sessions with you to talk about Twiz. I know people are kind of anxious to see the end of this scheme, so hopefully with the reconciliation and closing out of that you can finally bring Twiz to an end. So as Reg said there, my name is Karen Byrne and I'm joined by my colleague Jonathan King today, and he's part of the reconciliation team that have been responsible for, kind of development and building and testing and rolling out the various guidance and material that you've seen in the last couple of days. So I'm just going to talk you through the actual process. I have a lot of the screenshots to hopefully make it a little bit easier to see exactly what either yourselves or employers will be looking at in terms of carrying out that reconciliation process. And as you're probably all aware, it did go live on Monday the 22nd, and all of the information, all the employer guidance, the web content has been updated. There's a separate web kind of a hub pages on our website, all available there for employers to have a look through. So a very quick background. I know we're all familiar with Twiz at this stage, and as I said, probably sick of it and want to get out of it. But the background to the reconciliation element of this, I suppose, when Twiz was introduced, you know, a year ago, probably the 26th, yeah, almost a year ago, 26th of March, and it operated to the 31st of August, but it operated in 2 phases. So the transitional phase was that initial 26th of March to the 3rd of May that we saw when it was launched quite quickly. And then the operational phase commenced on the 4th of May and ran until the end of the scheme, the 31st of August. So during that transitional phase, revenue were refunded the maximum amount of subsidy of €410 per payslip, per qualifying payslip, per week to the employers, and the employer then calculated the subsidy payable to the employee based on what we called an average revenue net weekly pay, or NWP, and then they made that non-taxable payment of the subsidy amount through payroll to the employee. So the employer at that time was advised to hold the balance for a future refund back to revenue. So then when the operational phase commenced, revenue provided those relevant details to employers in what we called a CSV file. And those details included the maximum weekly wage subsidy amount, which was based on that AR/NWP. And that was to assist the employers to pay the correct amount of subsidy to the employees, and then to receive the refund of that correct amount rather than the maximum amount of €410. And obviously all that tiering and tapering arrangements were going on at that time as well, and that's when that was being applied. And then revenue, as I said, refunded those correct amounts. So that gave rise then to the requirement for a reconciliation on these employer balances between the 2 phases of the scheme. So just before I kind of launch into the actual schemes themselves, I mentioned the CSV file there, and at this stage there's a few variations of what we've seen as CSV. So for those obviously familiar with Twiz and operating Twiz, it was that employer CSV file was used during the operational phase with all of those details, as I mentioned, the maximum weekly wage subsidy and the AR/NWP, and that was provided to employers to calculate those subsidy amounts and to receive the refunds based on those payments. Then we saw the subsidy CSV calculator, which wasn't really a CSV file, it was more an Excel spreadsheet, but revenue made it available to employers on the website, and it was formatted with the necessary calculations and made available to employers more as a tool to assist with working out the correct amounts of Twiz that was to be paid to the employees. So the employers used that employer CSV file, brought it into the calculator, and it was able to make those calculations just to show them, you know, give them a bit more comfort, I suppose, around the subsidy paid amounts to employees. Then we saw the subsidy paid CSV file, and again that was launched for the purpose of commencing this reconciliation process, and it allowed employers to bulk upload these subsidy paid values, and that was launched around I think it was around the August or September, as I said, with the purpose to provide that subsidy paid data for reconciliation. And now moving into this final phase, we see the reconciliation detail CSV file, and that will contain the details of each payslip required in the reconciliation process. Now, I haven't taken many screenshots of the CSV files because it could just be a very long-winded presentation, but you can see those line item details of the headers for the CSV files available in the employer guidance documents. There's actual full tables describing each line item in those CSV documents in the employer guidance. And that's just a very quick example there. So it's the normal headers. There's a guidance link in there as well. You're probably very familiar with a lot of these headers, but there's various different types of CSV files now in the reconciliation, and I'll talk you through them depending on how the subsidy paid is reported. So just at the initial phase of the reconciliation, which I said went live on Monday, all employers should have received, well, most of employers should have received the ROS inbox notification, just alerting them to the fact that the reconciliation is now available. Now, there are some employers that won't have received that. They should already be aware that reconciliation is not live for them. They should already have be in contact with the revenue caseworker, and again I'll talk to you about them in the later slides. But this is just a simple notification that most employers should have received. So then they go into the Ross My Services. Again, everyone should be familiar with this. They'll view the link there under additional services, and they should have already used that to upload the subsidy paid data. So when they go into the Ross My Services link on the right hand side, and that will allow them to start the reconciliation process. Now, as I said, there are a number of versions of this CSV file, so it depends on which one is relevant to the employers, depending on the subsidy paid that has been reported. So employers have been reporting this subsidy paid since last September, and where all subsidy paid for all payslips has been reported, they'll see the following reconciliation detail screens when they click into that link on the My Services page. So this is it. This is the table summary for an employer that has reported all of the subsidy paid data, and it's a high level kind of summary table showing, you'll see there, the amount of Twiz that was paid to them by revenue, then the total amount payable in respect of their employees. Now, that's the amount based on the rules of the scheme, the actual legislation and the eligibility of the scheme, and then the total Twiz that was paid to their employees. And then you'll see the total result, and whether there's an amount owing to revenue or owed to the employer will pop into that last field there. So in this case, we have an amount that is owed to revenue. Excuse me. And that is in the majority of cases, which is as a result, as I said at the beginning there, of that maximum amount of €410 per payslip being paid in the transitional phase, and then with the correct amounts being paid during the operational phase. So again, on this screen, there's also a link to the new reconciliation employer guidance document. They can click that, and then there's information icons on each one of those kind of fields there to explain what the amounts actually mean. So just a continuation then of that screen. This is the bottom half of that screen that they'll see. So these employers that have reported all subsidy paid can download the reconciliation detail CSV file in what we call the long format. So, excuse me, they'll be able to see and check the full line item detail results of the reconciliation here. And when they're happy then with the details and they've reviewed everything, they can move on to that next stage and accept the reconciliation. And they will have until the 30th of June this year to accept that, or they can make any necessary corrections that they see, like when they examine the download file. If there's any corrections, they see if there's pay slips that are kind of, incorrect or they want to amend it, they can make those corrections and then come back and accept again. So for example, they may have reported all the subsidy paid, but there might be an individual issue on one pay slip or something. And again, as I said, they can correct that through the CSV upload, which is down on the bottom there, or there was 3 methods that employers could report subsidy pay data, and that was the CSV upload, the payroll software, or through the Ross manual screen. So those options are still available there. So just then on the bottom of the screen, there's information there as to how to make inquiries if employers are having difficulty, excuse me. But what we do ask is that they please only make contact with revenue after reviewing the reconciliation detail CSV file. If there's issues with that they can't, amend, excuse me, and after reading the employer guidance document, because there is a lot of information in that employer guidance document, and it may answer your query quite quickly just by looking into that document. It has a table of contents, and there's a lot of, excuse me, I'm just going to take a drink of water here, sorry. Sorry, excuse me, I was getting a frog in my throat there. But yes, there's a lot of, I suppose, scenarios in that employer guidance document that may help you answer any query that you might have. So please just read them before kind of making contact with revenue. And this is just a sample of the long version of that CSV file. It has the standard header, again, the note and the link to the guidance document. Each payslip where the subsidy paid has been reported, the amount, the status, and if it was refunded or not, that's the Y there in column I. The calculated field, and then column O is where you'll see that reconciled balance per pay slip. So in the first line there, there's €410 paid to the employer, where only 259 was reported as a subsidy paid to the employee. So it shows a difference of €151 on the reconciled balance, and that's the amount that's going to be recouped through the reconciliation process in this instance. So I'll just follow through with this kind of one scenario for an employer who has, kind of uploaded all subsidy paid. They didn't really have any issues. They accept the reconciliation. Excuse me, and now there's a balance owed, so they can make a payment back to revenue through Ross. And this is just the Ross screen again. Most people will be familiar with this. Now, just to mention on this, on the previous screens, I'll just go back to the reconciled amount there. So this amount that's owed to revenue, the 172,666.29, that does not include any payments that have been previously made to revenue in relation to the Twiz. So if employers have made payments, and some employers have been making repayments of Twiz all along, they can look up their payment record in Ross under the TWSS or tax head, and they can see if they've already made a payment, and then they just click into the detail behind that amount that's paid, and they'll see if it relates to the Twiz. Now, the final statement of account will show those payments that have been made, but for the purpose of reconciliation here, this is literally the reconciled amount. So if they're unsure and they want to check, have they made payments already off this amount that's owed, go back into the revenue record and just see were there any payments made against it, and then it'll show up on the final statement of account. And again, that's just the Ross screen, and then we have the receipt for amount paid. So that was the full kind of probably a clean version of the process, as I said, where the employer reported all subsidy paid, they downloaded the CSV, they reviewed it, they accepted it, they made the payment in Ross. So they're done with Twiz effectively, and as Jonathan pointed out to me earlier or yesterday evening, we've 1,600 employers that have already followed that process and they've closed out of Twiz. So, that's great, and it is working within the last couple of days for employers. So I'll move on now to where subsidy paid has not been reported. Okay, so no subsidy paid has been reported by employers. So we'll see, again, it looks like a very similar screen. It is the reconciliation summary table. You see the amount there, Twiz amount paid by revenue to the employer, 11,640 rounded up. Then we have the zero as the total that was paid in respect to the employees, and then the amount payable is zero. So in this instance, the full 11,640 is actually due, owed back to revenue. As there's been no subsidy paid reported, so revenue will look to recoup the full amount where no subsidy paid has been reported. And there's actually a message there to say on the bottom, in order to reduce this amount, you should immediately submit the subsidy paid reported for your employees. So there is still an option in these cases. If no subsidy paid has been reported, they still can go back in, report that subsidy paid data and upload it to revenue, and that'll be done in kind of a real-time environment. So once they do that, they can go back in and download the reconciliation CSV and review that, and any balances or payments in that instance should be offset against that amount owed. It'll effectively adjust that amount that's owed. So again, there still is an option there for employers to do that. And this, again, just an example of the file that those employers will see. And you'll see there, sorry, I don't have the actual column headers there, but you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 across. You'll see subsidy paid, and it's actually unreported on that CSV file. So it will be identified as being unreported on the detailed CSV file. And it distinguishes between kind of zero and for those that haven't reported anything. So if the employer reported zero, it will show zero in that subsidy paid column. But if none has been reported, it shows that unreported word there. So revenue will look to recoup the full amount of the 1640 for those payslips that remain unreported. Now, if they do upload, as I said, it is in real time, so the reconciliation will recalculate and then they come back in and get the revised CSV file and have the subsidy paid included. That will bring to bear on the calculations. So moving on then, so for some employers, there may be a refund due, and I think it is a low percentage looking at the figures, but there are cases where a refund will be due. And on this instance, I think, yeah, about 3,000 is showed there as a refund. So it will say, you know, Twiz owed to you in the employer's instance. So again, they can go in and they can download the CSV file. Any money then that is due to be refunded, it won't be refunded to them until they actually accept the reconciliation. So, you know, they have to still follow through this process. So they still have to accept the reconciliation before the 30th of June, before the refund will be made, and it will automatically then be refunded to them. If there's any issues again with the subsidy paid data, they can still correct that before accepting the reconciliation. And again, with the previous one, if any changes are in there, they re-upload the data and any changes will be reflected in the balance. Again, that's just another example of a CSV file in that instance. So you'll see there could be some reasons, you know, for a refund, particularly if they, you know, they might have operated in the operational phase. So you'll see the refund not allowed reason there, the J9 payslip leave date. So that, you know, they may have been entitled to the payment. It may have been the last payslip when the employee was leaving. The leave date was included. The employer reported the subsidy and calculated that payable amount. And then the reconciled balance is a negative figure. So that's money owing to the employer. So what the employer can do with these CSV files is, as a sample, they can look for those or filter for those negative figures, and that's the money owing for those pay slips. You know, there's zero if there's nothing owing, or if there's a positive amount, it's money owing back to revenue. So in this case, it's the refund not allowed reason is shown, and again, they can filter by that reason as well, and they can see, you know, if a payslip wasn't allowed, or, you know, the reason is in there. And again, the guidance document explains a lot of those, you know, refund not allowed reasons in there. Excuse me again. So try and move on there. Yeah. So reconciliation not yet available. So as I said earlier on, there's some employers that are in a process with revenue already. Okay, so a caseworker should have already contacted these employees where they haven't received that notice to tell them that the reconciliation is available. Now, if they log into Ross, the link is still there, but they'll be brought through the screen to say that it's not available to them. They can still download a short, detailed CSV file, and that shows, you know, a certain amount of info. And they can still also upload subsidy paid data through that link. So sorry, that's the screen there. So again, the option there is still to download the reconciliation CSV file and upload. And then this is the very short version of that CSV file. So each payslip with each refunded amount is there, the subsidy paid that was reported. Then they don't get that extra detail in terms of the subsidy payable, excuse me, and the reconciled balance. So that won't be available until the reconciliation is ready for that employer, based on the process that they're going through with their caseworker at the moment. Okay. So again, they can see the subsidy paid, or if it's unreported, if they haven't reported that data. But most, as I said, are already involved with a process with revenue. And when the caseworker makes that available, they will get that Ross inbox notification to tell them that the reconciliation is now available for them. So moving on then to the reconciliation accepted, and I know I've mentioned this now in the various stages. So in terms of accepting that reconciliation, if they go through obviously the CSV download file and they're happy with the detail that's in there and with the figures and there's no adjustments required, then they move through and they accept the reconciliation. And once they do that, it effectively crystallizes the liability for them or any refund that's owing or owed for the employer. So if they come back in after accepting the button, you'll see there that it's disabled for them. So, and it'll tell them then that reconciliation was accepted on whatever date that they accepted it. And then the statement of account will be sent to the Ross inbox. Now, again, they can still make corrections if they find that there's something, or maybe they forgot to correct, or, you know, they forgot to fix. So it will auto recalculate the final liability then if they make those corrections before the 30th of June. And again, it'll be brought to bear on that account. They can still also upload further subsidy paid data after it has been accepted. But again, they'll get that message, reconciliation was accepted on whatever date, and any changes will be reflected then in the final balance. And then this is just your revenue record. So when they see on the Ross inbox, the statement of account doesn't actually issue in real time. So although when you upload the subsidy data and the reconciliation details CSV file, that's all kind of in real time, so the balance should adjust. But in terms of the statement of account, it does take an overnight update. So they won't see that immediately in the Ross inbox. So if there are any changes prior to accepting the result, you know, that'll be real time. They'll accept, then that night the statement of account will process and it'll be available for the next day. And obviously if it's over the course of a weekend that employers are accepting, it'll be after the Monday night update that they'll be able to see the statement of account there. So that's just the detail again that probably everyone is familiar with, and this is what will show then in terms of this statement here. It's a balanced statement. So they got €100, the wage subsidy €100, and it balanced out then that there's nothing owing in this case. So it will show the balance outstanding, and as I said earlier, any payments that have been previously made in relation to the TWSS or tax head will show up in there before or after the reconciliation if they made those payments, sorry, and then that will be the final balance for the employer will show here on the statement of account. So then just the final couple of slides here, just some important things to note. So when the employer is either repaying the Twiz due or, you know, making those payments to revenue, there's also a facility under the debt warehousing. Now, again, this has been this is scheme launched back last year. I think it was under the July Stimulus Hub, or under the July Stimulus package, sorry. So where the employer, in terms of reconciliation, is owed money from revenue, as I said, those refunds will be made to the employers once they accept the reconciliation, and the money will be refunded to the bank account details that are on record and that they used for operating the Twiz. So when they were receiving those refunds for Twiz, that bank account will be where they receive the refund from the reconciled balance. The debt warehousing scheme then, so if employers find that, you know, okay, they have a liability, they have difficulty meeting the payment, excuse me, they can avail of the debt warehousing scheme if they're eligible for it. Now, if they're already in that scheme, the liability will automatically be warehoused once the reconciliation is accepted. Okay, so if they find that they're eligible for that, they haven't already been included in it, they can apply, and if already in it, then once it's accepted, it'll be automatically warehoused. If they find they're not eligible for the scheme, they can pay the balance through Ross, through the RevPay facility with a debit or credit card, or they can make a payment through the bank account details. Unfortunately, there is no phased payment arrangement facility in place, but it is under development. It just takes time to build that facility into the debt management system. So once that does go live, once that's available, you know, obviously we will issue some communications around that, most likely on our website or through an e-brief notification. Excuse me. So then finally moving into the closing out the reconciliation. So as I said, it must be finalised on or before the 30th of June 2021. Now that's the deadline that has been set. And I know we've had a couple of deadlines in relation to this reconciliation. You know, it has been pushed out a couple of times since last October, but this is the deadline that has been set to finalise those details. As I said at the start, I think we all want to see the end of Twiz. So if after the 30th of June, the employer has not reported all of that subsidy paid data, then the reconciliation calculation will set that subsidy payable amount to zero for all payslips that don't have subsidy paid reported. So again, that will see the recoupment of the amounts of Twiz that were paid out. If after the 30th of June and the employers have reported all the subsidy paid, but they haven't actually accepted the reconciliation, then a notification will issue for any amounts that are due to revenue, and then the normal collection and enforcement process will begin. And then moving finally on to further guidance. So as Rachel said, these slides will issue out. So there's various links there. That new guidance documents, we do ask, please read through that. There could be a lot of technical data in there or information in there that might not be relevant to you, but just even to be aware of the sections of it. If you are having issues with the process, please have a look in there. All those screenshots that I've gone through there in the presentation, they're all in that guidance document. There's a few other areas that I didn't really touch on, but they're fully explained in the document as well. We have the Twiz Reconciliation Hub on the website. Sorry, I don't know how that jumped there. The Reconciliation Hub on the website, it has been redrafted and revised, so it does contain a lot of information there around the reconciliation process. And then the Section 28 measures, that was just where Twiz was enacted, the Minister's determination, and then the two versions of the previous FAQ documents for Twiz. Now they're important because up to version 8 of that document was all around the transitional phase of Twiz, and then from version 9 to 18 is the operational phase. So they are kind of two very different versions of the document between version 8 and version 18. So please make sure, you know, if you do have other queries around the payslips, around, you know, those payslip not allowed reasons, they were all contained in those documents. And I know it's a very long document, we are aware of that, but it does contain, again, a lot of those solutions in there and examples for people. I should also mention there are actually examples in the reconciliation guidance document as well, if people want to see there how the subsidy paid versus subsidy payable and all of that is being reconciled. There are actual examples in there. So that brings me to the end. I hope I didn't confuse anyone. I hope it kind of shed some light onto what reconciliation is. Now I know we have been talking about this reconciliation process kind of from near enough the beginning of the Twiz. I know I was mentioning it in a lot of the webinars that we were doing, that it was coming and that employers were getting ready for it. And as I've already said, about 1,600 employers have closed out and reconciled their balance, which is great. So I'll hand you back over to Rachel to finish off the presentation, and then we'll chat to you in the Q&A. So thanks very much.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Karen. That was a really informative presentation, and it was great to see all of the different scenarios and the different CSV files that apply to each one. So now, staying on the topic of the TWSS reconciliation, I want to have a look at common questions that our customer support team have been asked over the past few days. And I know some of this will be repeating some of what Karen has already covered. I had a call with Audrey, our customer support manager, and some of our support agents yesterday to hear about the questions that have been coming in. And to be honest, they said the majority of calls coming in are from customers who are shocked and wondering why they have to pay this money back to revenue. And I suppose just to reiterate what Karen has said, for the first 6 weeks of the scheme during the transitional phase, revenue refunded a flat rate of €410 per employee per pay period, regardless of the employee's earnings. And in a lot of cases, this €410 exceeded the subsidy that the employee was entitled to receive. And it was made very clear from the start that there would be a reconciliation to rectify this overpayment. I know we certainly reiterated that this would be the case on, I'd say, pretty much all of our COVID-19 webinars. Another common question that our support team have been asked is why their TWSS reconciliation summary says they owe revenue, but they had already repaid this overpayment to revenue when the scheme ended. And unfortunately, as Karen mentioned, the TWSS reconciliation summary screen does not reflect repayments that have already been made to revenue through the RevPay facility. We're also getting quite a lot of questions where employers want us to review the reconciliation process for them. Unfortunately, there is nothing that we can do to help. It is a revenue scheme, and revenue are the ones who paid the subsidy and are reconciling the amounts due. One thing that the reconciliation process has brought to light is corrections that need to be rectified. Mistakes are becoming more apparent this week, and this is one area that can be resolved through the payroll software. In some instances, corrections will need to be made so that the right subsidy amount is reflected on ROS. I suppose the most important point to note is that employers do have until the end of June this year to review the detailed information provided by revenue and accept those reconciliation amounts. Where you do make corrections to the payroll, you won't need to upload the TWSS reconciliation CSV file to ROS again. These corrections will be reflected on the correction PSR that will be sent to revenue after this has been resolved. And any concerns can be raised with revenue via my inquiries. I just want to quickly jump into the payroll software now, and first into Thesaurus Payroll Manager. And the one figure from the statement of account that you can cross-check in the payroll software is the amount of subsidy paid to employees. To view this amount in the payroll software, go to Reports, followed by TWSS Report. And here we just need to enter the date range required. So I'll say the 1st of March until the 31st of August and prepare. So here you'll see a list of all the subsidy amounts paid to your employees in each of the different pay periods. Here I have just one employee, but if I scroll to the bottom of this report, you can see there is a new totals figure at the bottom. And this totals figure hasn't gone live in the software just yet, but it is coming very soon. And this will allow you to cross-check to see if the figure for total TWSS paid to your employees on your TWSS reconciliation summary matches the total subsidy figure in the payroll software.
Hey, Rachel?
Yeah.
Can I just jump in there to say that an upgrade is actually available for that now?
Oh, brilliant. Great.
Thanks.
As of yesterday, it wasn't live. So if these figures don't match, as I mentioned, a correction may be required and a new submission will need to be made to revenue for that pay period. However, if that figure is correct, the one other figure on the TWSS reconciliation summary is causing the incorrect reconciliation amount, you will need to contact revenue through my inquiries. And we have no way of knowing how much subsidy you actually received from revenue, just how much you paid to your employees. Next, I'm going to show you this in BrightPay, and the process is very similar. You can check the amount of subsidy paid to your employees by going to Employees, then Reconciliation CSV File. And here the dates have defaulted to the entire duration of the scheme, and I'm going to click Continue. And finally, similar to Thesaurus Payroll Manager, you can see a summary of all of the subsidy payments made to each employee each pay period. And at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a new totals figure, which is coming soon, which you can cross-check with the amount of subsidy paid to employees on your TWSS reconciliation summary in ROSS. And as I mentioned earlier, employers do have until the 30th of June to accept the reconciliation amounts, and Revenue strongly recommend that employers take the time to read and understand the guidance before accepting the reconciliation. Going back to the PowerPoint again, I want to give you a quick update on the EWSS. We're not going to cover this in too much detail today, as there's been very little changes since our last COVID webinar. The one update on the EWSS today is in relation to the extension of the enhanced rates. The rates were due to revert back to the original subsidy rates at the end of March this year. However, the enhanced rates have now been extended until the 30th of June 2021. Upgrades were released on the 11th of March for both Thesaurus Payroll Manager and BrightPay, catering for the extension of the enhanced subsidy rates. And just to recap on what those enhanced rates are, the subsidy ranges between €203 and €350, depending on the employee's gross weekly wage. The subsidy is not available for employees whose gross weekly wage is less than €151.50 or greater than €1,462. Just looking back at the agenda for today's webinar, next we're going to look at practical guidance on how Connect can automate payroll tasks to improve the efficiency of your payroll and ultimately help your business throughout the pandemic. So just to explain what Connect is a little bit more, Connect is an optional add-on that works alongside both BrightPay and Thesaurus Payroll Manager. The payroll is still processed on the desktop applications, but the payroll information is stored online on a secure cloud server. And rather than talk you through what Connect can do, I'm going to jump into the software to show you how it works. And I know some of you on today's webinar are already using Connect, and if you are, feel free to go make a quick cup of tea or coffee. It should only really take a couple of minutes, and then we'll get to the questions and answers. So here we are in BrightPay payroll software. And the first feature that I want to mention today is our improved multi-user functionality to reduce the risk of conflicting copies. When you open the payroll, Connect will automatically check to see if there's a more up-to-date version of the employer file. In other words, where someone else in your organization worked on that employer, or maybe even you worked on that employer from a different computer. If a more up-to-date version is available, you will be given the option to download and use the most recent version, or you can continue using my version. The software will also notify you if another person is currently in the employer file, and you can be notified when the other person has finished, and it will also tell the other user that you are waiting to access the payroll. Or the second option here is to continue anyway. If you choose this option, it will notify the other user and prevent them from syncing any pending changes to the payroll software. This functionality, the other users check and the version check, is also available in Thesaurus Payroll Manager. I'm just using BrightPay today for demo purposes. And it's also important to note that you need to be using either Thesaurus Connect or BrightPay Connect to have this functionality. As I mentioned previously, Connect will automatically back up your payroll data to the cloud, where it is stored securely, and a chronological history of all backups is kept, where you can restore a backup at any time if needed. Here I'm going to go to Employer Dashboards. And this is what the online portal looks like with both BrightPay Connect and Thesaurus Connect. I suppose just to add as well, there are some differences in how Connect works with both Thesaurus and BrightPay, but for the most part, it is very similar. The first thing we come to here is the notifications, and here I have an annual leave request from an employee. And the great thing about Connect is that employees don't need to be in the office to request leave. So this is especially useful for employees who are working from home. They can request leave anywhere, anytime, directly from their smartphone or tablet. Also on the notifications, we have a request to approve the payroll and another to submit the payroll entry. So these two notifications are only really applicable to payroll bureaus and accountants, where you can request information from your clients and the client can log in to submit the data or approve the payroll. And it's also important to note that this is probably the key difference between BrightPay Connect and Thesaurus Connect. This bureau functionality to request the payroll and approve the payroll is only available with BrightPay Connect, not Thesaurus Connect. You'll see these tabs across the top of the screen, and I'm going to very quickly go through each one. The first is employees, and here you can click into each employee's profile to access payslips, and payslips will automatically be available on Connect for both clients and employees, so there's no need to print or email payslips. Next is reports, and any report that is set up and saved on the payroll software will be available for you to run on your online portal. Next is the calendar, which is a company-wide employee calendar where you can view past and scheduled leave. Within the revenue tab, revenue payments flow through from the payroll to Connect, and here you can log in to view exactly how much you owe to revenue. The final tab then is documents, and here you can upload any type of document that you want to distribute to your employees. So you can communicate with employees who are working from home, and you can also upload, for example, COVID policies and working from home policies. And I just want to say also that our sister product, Bright Contracts, includes a COVID response plan, and they will also be releasing a vaccine policy shortly as well. You can send notifications to employees and monitor the date and timestamp of when they have accessed the resource or document. So that's the online employer dashboard, and the employees also have access to a self-service portal which they can log into on an internet browser or on an Android or iOS device. The employee will receive a notification on their device when a new payslip is available, and they'll also get a notification when a HR document has been shared with them or when an annual leave request has been approved. If I click on this notification, it will open the app, and at the bottom of the screen we have the notifications. The employee can go into documents to view payroll and HR documents, including a full payslip library. They can view their past and scheduled leave and request leave in the calendar, or they can view and update their personal details to ensure GDPR compliance. So it's a really powerful app with self-service features so that the employee can do a lot of the admin-heavy tasks themselves rather than coming to you, for example, for lost payslips or leave balance inquiries. So I'm going to finish up there with the sales plug, but if you do want to find out more, we do run online demos of both the payroll software and the Connect add-on on a daily basis. So please let us know if you do want to book onto one of the free online demos. So it's now time for the questions and answers. And if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the questions box, and we will try to get through as many questions as possible. As I mentioned, however, we do have a lot of attendees logged on today, So unfortunately, we won't have a chance to answer every single question, and I see a lot of questions have come in already. For our questions and answers, we have Audrey Mooney and Paul Byrne from Thesaurus, and we're also delighted to have Karen Byrne and Jonathan King with us from the Revenue Commissioners for today's webinar. We do also have Laura Murphy on in the background for if there are any employment or HR related questions. So Audrey, I know you've been keeping an eye on the questions that have been coming in during the webinar. So can I pass it over to you to manage the questions and answers?
Sure, no problem. Thanks, Rachel, and good morning, everyone. Yeah, quite a few questions, and I'll try and avoid repeat ones as best as I can. So I suppose there's a lot of questions coming in just in relation to paying this money over to revenue, asking how will it be collected, and I suppose when the payment is due. So I don't know if Karen or Jonathan would like to come in there on that one.
Yeah, I can, Audrey, no problem.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Jonathan.
how you can pay it. As soon as you've accepted reconciliation, you get your statement of account. Now, that's not an assessment. It will show what has been paid to date. I know, and I might come back to some of the general queries that you were getting in there and address them in the round. When you click on accept, you'll be given an option to do the usual rev pay through cards or EFT. And then an option will be given you to follow the guidance for warehousing to contact the CGs. So you can do that pretty much immediately if you accepted reconciliation. If you haven't accepted reconciliation and we're pushing up to the 30th of June, we've only recently agreed that the due date for Twiz repayments is the 30th of June. So assessments can issue 30 days after that. So you'll be talking the end of July. But really, if you're happy with the reconciliation figures, and hopefully you will be because it's based on the data that was provided to us, you can pay pretty much immediately. Just coming back then to kind of, I can understand some people are probably shocked when they click on and they see the amount of liabilities that are there. Hopefully they're not surprised though that this money is due back, because it was a condition of joining the scheme way back in March this time last year. It was a condition, and we knew at the time our systems weren't up to speed in terms of calculating A or NWPs or anything like that, so we just issued the flat payment. So that's always been in the background of the minds. We would have thought of employers that this money has been due back, and with employees kind of assessed or not assessed preliminary tax reflecting subsidy paid data that was passed to us, we'd hoped it was in employers' minds that this money would kind of fall due. Probably employers are agents. Unfortunately, our system can't reflect the payments that have been made back to us, and that was for various reasons. Like, we're still doing a data cleanup. Some people, when they have repaid Twiz, they put it into the wrong tax head. They might have put it into their VAT account, and they could have gone to Ewss. So we're moving those figures around as well, but it will be in statement of account, which is kind of after the horse is bolted. It will be reflected in there. Now, two situations really that arose, and Karen said it, that if there's liabilities there, it will be because of the transitional phase. The vast majority of money will be because of that, because if we paid 410 and the employee was only paid 210, 200 has to come back, and it can add up quite quickly. The other one is where there isn't subsidy paid data returned to us. Now, thankfully, and I appreciate it, most of the people probably on this call have given, 95% of employers have given us the subsidy paid data, and that's reflected in the system. If you haven't given us that data and you look at the reconciliation record, it zeroes out essentially your entitlement to a subsidy being payable to the employer. So that will give a large figure. Looks like a massive liability, but it's not a liability until you give us the subsidy paid data. Now, that can be given, we'd rather you give it as soon as possible and not be pushing up to the 30th of June. If it goes past the 30th of June, the system kind of locks down and says, right, you didn't pay your staff any subsidy paid data, and we'll be looking for the Twiz back, and then assessments will issue. So they're the two main scenarios. The operational phase that ran from, I can't remember, was it the 3rd of May, should all be all right, unless there's no subsidy paid data there, or the transitional phase data matches what you gave us. That's where the liabilities are arising.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Jonathan. That answers a lot of the questions. So the next question there is any advice regarding the employees' liability and the choice for employers to pay the tax an USC bill for them, what is the best way to do that? So Paul, I suppose you and I strongly feel that it's best to do this outside of the payroll, just give the money to the employees. You know, it eliminates the need to amend any payroll submissions or anything like that.
Yeah, no, I think it's by far the simplest way. Plus, I suppose it gives the employee the possible benefit of the cash flow, in that, you know, they'll have 4 years of reduction of tax credits to actually, you know, that'll actually look after the liability. So it might be advantageous to actually receive the money, you know, directly, rather than it being included on an adjusting PSR at the end of the year. So that's basically the decision we took on that.
Yeah. Okay, somebody's just saying that if they submitted the Twiz reconciliation file to revenue in September, are they now required to submit another one? So no, it is just one. So I suppose once they're happy that the subsidy paid date is there for all active pay slips, then I suppose that job is done.
It is, yeah, it is. I'll just come in, like, it's very, very early days yet in terms of, we were just looking at those cases that came in yesterday, and I have daily meetings because Rycinda was on the work group that kind of built the system with Excel. So most of the queries that are coming in, a very first thing, and it's very simple, but we are getting a lot of calls, have your Ross cert. A lot of them have elapsed during lockdown, and if somebody's trying to use a Ross cert and they can't get into Twiz, make sure you've got the right admin rights. So you might have to go to your administrator first and not revenue. Quite simple. We're getting a lot of calls on them. CSV and the interpretation of it, like when you look at this, the balance, some people will be shocked. Hopefully most people should be. I think most cases at this stage are within a tolerance of 500 euros and are happy enough to proceed. Some people are finding there's a lot of information in there with subsidy on it, like subsidy paid, that's what you pay to employees. Subsidy payable, the revenue system calculates that you're due based on the ARNWP. We have a new one in there now, subsidy resolved, that you'll see. It's when a caseworker, if there's some kind of, if you've contacted us because what we might call a care and management case and something's gone wrong, you need to contact us and we have something open, our caseworker will probably put a resolved figure in there. We're getting queries on what these kind of subsidy resolved, subsidy payable mean. Then there's a reconciliation subsidy. They're based on various rules. And then the Twiz amount is the amount we paid. So there's a lot of information in there. It's all in the guidance and it explains it hopefully much clearer. And when it runs through the examples, it becomes clearer to everybody. Again, the queries coming in, why am I owed money? Again, it's overpaid on the transitional phase. Potential large bills because there's no subsidy paid. And then there's outliers like deleted and not replaced. If something has been deleted and it hasn't been replaced and we paid Twiz on it, there's a liability there. So we'd encourage you to go back and look, should there be an active payroll in there? IK came up as an issue and it's come up quite frequently now. We haven't any, we're not going to give any prescriptive guidance on the BIK. We're kind of discussing it with the board at the moment. We know that with lockdown, people won't be using the company cars as much, so we would expect a diminution in the amount of personal usage of it if the company is open. But we can't say like, well, we'll take 100 kilometers here because different firms in different locations would benefit some and not others. So let's take a realistic approach. It would kind of be our thinking on it at the moment. Guidance will follow on it. When we're talking about correcting pay slips as well, J1s to A1s and so on, just don't do that during reconciliation. You'll see it in corrections in section 7, and I know the guidance only came out Monday afternoon. There's good advice there about the change of the PRSI rates. We're not overly worried about it during reconciliation. If you give it a non-J9 with a subsidy paid on it, just give us the subsidy paid figures, and kind of post reconciliation will be given more guidance on the potential PRSI liabilities. Compliance cases and reverse out cases, maternity benefit cases, you probably all have a few of those. We've held, I can't remember the number, we've held a couple of thousand cases back. They won't have got the notification in the Ross inbox. Reconciliation is available to them. You might get queries on that, or you might be one of those companies. They'll all get released in a phase. Once they're worked in compliance, or if you've contacted us and we're working with you, and we take a flag off just to release those into reconciliation once everything has been handled from our side. And then there's some cases that have kind of opted out or reversed out cases. I don't know if we've any on the line here. They've been held back until the Twiz is kind of being repaid as well. And that's a bit, they're the kind of queries I think I have at the moment. Yeah,
Jonathan,
a few bases there.
It's Karen here, sorry. Can I just say, just in terms of that original question, somebody who submitted their CSV file back in September, just as long as that was all of their subsidy paid that was being reported, as Audrey said, on the active pay slips. Now, you will still have to go through the reconciliation process, download the CSV, make sure it matches to what you uploaded and you're happy with it, and then still accept the reconciliation. So they still have to go through and accept the reconciliation if they're happy with it. They don't have to provide further information if they're happy with what they submitted, but you still do have to follow that process and accept before the 30th of June.
Perfect, thanks, Karen. I suppose a couple of people, just coming back to what we've already covered about the payments that have already been made to you, but a few people are saying that they're afraid to accept the reconciliation in case this leads to a duplicate payment being taken. So I think we could assure people that that's not going to happen, Jonathan and Karen, yeah.
No, it shouldn't happen at all. Now, if they are, if they want to be 100% sure, they could ring up the NEH and just say, can you see my payment in there if they're large payments? But once we've been working through, said we did the cleanup, we'd be satisfied that those that paid us back correctly, we have it in there. So we're probably still got moving some out of Ewss and so on. But the vast majority of cases will be reflected in what we call the Twiz or tax head and will come out in the statement of account.
Perfect. And I know the guidance for the reconciliation is going to be updated just to include clear instructions on, where they can check that money to make sure that it is sitting there.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Somebody's just asking, do you know what the sorry.
Employer guidance is probably a little bit fluid if we were finding feedback from yourselves and others that were missing certain things. If there's any amendments to it, like I think that Karen said, we went through quite a few versions of the FAQs. Originally, there might be 2 or 3 of these. So if we're finding we've missed anything, hopefully we haven't, and we'll update the guidance.
That can evolve, yeah, perfect. Somebody's just asking, do you know what the turnaround time is for queries regarding the reconciliation that are sent via my inquiries?
No, we don't. Unfortunately, it's only a day and a half now, and we're kind of, as a team, we're looking at them all to see if there's anything we've missed.
It'll probably depend on the case itself as well. I suppose they'll all be different. Absolutely.
I know that some of them that accepted within thresholds, the payments are due to issue today. Some of them are just auto-generated. If there was issues in previous pay slips and all, they might have gone for somebody just to eyeball them. But we'd be satisfied at the moment. It's probably a good time to get into us because it's only going to get busier. But I can't give guarantee on the turnaround times at this stage now.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Jonathan. Somebody's just asking, or was saying that during the initial stages of Twiz, they were instructed not to submit amended payrolls. In a case where the submitted payroll is incorrect and submission of corrected payroll would impact on the reconciliation, what should they do?
Resubmit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose if what's submitted isn't actually what happened, it needs to be corrected.
Yeah, now if it throws something out now, if it's something going back to January, February, you'd probably have to contact a caseworker to say why that wasn't proper. But if it's actually during the Twiz period and they've got a good reason, just contact the help desk and by all means reflect what actually happened and resubmit. Because you can't, even if you go through reconciliation and you discover at the end of the year or whatever, with the auditors are in, oh, we missed this, you can go through a re-trigger. If you have to submit it, even if you've gone to reconciliation, if you change those records, you go to reconciliation again, you get another ROS notification in your inbox. But if you're aware of them now, please put them in now, and it will kind of re-trigger the reconciliation calculation, and you get a new notification.
Perfect. Yeah, and I suppose if it's somebody using our software and they need help doing that, just contact the support team, and somebody be happy to help you. So the next question there is, we are a small family auctioneers and we're on Twiz and now Ewss. We had deposits on hands when we went into lockdown and are doing our best.
Audrey, I'm just going to jump in. Your sound is broken up there.
Oh, I broke up, did I?
Yeah.
Okay, so the same with actual sales and projections to the end of June, they're still under by more than 30%. Is it okay to stay on Ewss?
Yeah, I can take that one out. Oh, sorry, come on.
No, go on ahead. No, if you want to take it, jump in.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, if the actual, if they're looking at their actual months of January, February, what they actually, did make, and the projections for the remaining 4 months up to the end of June, and if those two together are still more than 30% less than what it was in 6 months to June 19, they're fine continuing to claim the Ewss. And I can understand with auctioneers, they probably were doing absolutely nothing for the last couple of months because we know viewings or whatever. So it's probably quite conceivable in that case that they would be doing very little business for the remainder of the next few months anyway. But obviously keep the records so that you can show them to revenue if they're required. And as long as reasonable assumptions are made, I think it'll be fine.
Perfect, thank you. This question was covered during the presentation, but just in case the person missed it, just can you advise on Ewss ending on the 31st of March, or is it being continued? So I suppose we can confirm that Ewss is here until the end of June with those enhanced subsidy rates.
And God knows it'll probably be extended after that, but hopefully it won't be made too complicated.
Hope so. It's nice and easy compared to Twiz, so we'd like it to stay.
We'd always like to see the back of Twiz.
Definitely.
Be out of a job.
There's a few questions coming in from people saying that the amount they received from revenue is slightly higher than slightly higher than the figure that's showing in the reconciliation summary screen. I'm wondering, would this have something got to do with the PAYE and USC refunds, Karen and Jonathan, or do you think there could be another reason?
No, I'd say you're right. It would only be that. It depends on the date. It's hard to look without seeing the data, but you're right. It's probably if it came back, it's USC and tax credits.
Yeah, because of course they won't form part of the reconciliation. Yeah. The next question there is, a client wishes to pay employees tax liability for over a period of 4 years. So I think just to confirm that employers paying this liability, it can only be done up to the end of June this year. The employers aren't able to pay that over 4 years.
No, that's the deadline as well that was set under that arrangement. It's a one-off arrangement for the purpose of the liability for the employees, where employers wish to or can help them out with that tax liability. So the deadline is 30th of June.
Perfect, thanks Karen. A few questions from people then just asking, how do they contact revenue to discuss issues with individual reconciliations? So I think your preferred method is my inquiries, is that fair to say?
Yeah, that would be, definitely. It's actually probably, at least you can track it, you can see it on the My Inquiries, go in there. You can contact the National Employer Helpline, but the phone lines can be quite busy. You could be hanging on there, especially, when we launch something like this, the phone lines tend to just light up. So, My Inquiries is probably your best bet. But, please do read the guidance, as we said. If you can't answer your query through that, then make the contact.
Perfect. There's a few questions in from agents just saying that they didn't get a notification about the reconciliation. So I think it's fair to say that the notification only went to the employers and didn't go to agents. Isn't that correct?
No, it could have gone to agents as well. It depends on the administrator on the system. Now, as Jonathan said, the ROS certs may have expired during lockdown. It might be an issue on the administrator's side. So just check the access to the certificates first of all. And if the agent had been set up under the Twiz or the TWSS or tax head as well, because obviously when the scheme was launched, we were in a lockdown, so they may not have set their agent up on the tax head either. So just check the administration side first, and if you can't get in or if you can't be added, if the agent can't be added, then contact the ROS help desk.
Okay. Somebody's just asking there, if their business is closed and no wages have been paid, do they still have to do the reconciliation? So I suppose you would only request the reconciliation from an employer where you have received a J9 payslip.
Correct. Yeah.
But yeah, if there's no J9 payslip, there's no, there's no reconciliation to be done.
Well, I think it's Jonathan, you might confirm, it's all employers who operated the Twiz at any stage
That's right. Even ceased employers will still be able to go in and have a look at the Twizzer and go through the reconciliation process.
Yeah, I suppose this person saying they didn't pay anybody, but you must have received a J9 payslip if they've been requested to do the reconciliation.
Yes.
A few people just asking for confirmation that where the amount owed is 500 euros or less, that they don't owe anything. I think people are a little bit surprised with that.
Correct. Yeah, the threshold is kind of brought in because it would probably cost revenue more to be pursuing 2 or 3 euros here per payslip. So we aggregated it up, save kind of admin costs for employers and for revenue. So it brings a lot of people into a balanced situation. But yeah, they won't be asked to pay anything on that.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Somebody's just asking, will there be any further investigations done into Twiz to see if it was operated properly, or will it be a case that when the reconciliation is accepted that it's closed in full?
I imagine, sorry, Jonathan, do you want to?
Yeah, we're still working through the assessment phase, and when that comes in, I'd imagine will form part of our compliance program in the future as well. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I think so. On the compliance program, it has been ongoing, so it will possibly continue on into the compliance framework for the next year or so.
Okay, thank you. Somebody's just asking, will Revenue be issuing letters to clients to advise them of the balances, or will it just be via Ross?
Ross.
Yeah, well, if it depends. If they don't close out by 30th of June, then that's when the notices will start issuing following that, depending on whether they accept it or whether they've reported the subsidy paid. So if they don't close out of it before 30th June, then yes, they will probably receive some sort of contact.
Perfect. Just a few people saying they received the notice, but the accept reconciliation button is not on the screen. I'm assuming that's where you haven't got all the subsidy data reported. Correct. Would that be right? Or?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So they need to report that. They can still do that through the 3 options on the screen, the CSV upload, through their payroll software if it allows for it, or through the direct Ross reporting. They can still report that subsidy paid.
Brilliant, thank you. Somebody's asking, they've already paid the money back to revenue, but it's an amount that's less than 500 euros. So given that you're now not chasing this, they want to know, will they be getting that back?
Good question. I don't know. I think it's something that's being discussed by our board as well. I don't have the answer for that at the moment. They've already paid it back. Okay,
no problem. Thank you. Somebody's just saying that they didn't receive the notification. There's been no caseworker assigned to their account. They're not aware of any reason for this not being available. So should they contact Revenue to see, I suppose, why it's not available for them?
Yes, definitely. Like if they haven't contacted us prior and we don't have a compliance issue open and they're not waiting on maternity benefit uploads, can't see why they wouldn't have got the notification.
So, yes, if they're not aware, just make contact.
Yeah.
Okay. Somebody's just saying they didn't register for the scheme until May, but they had been paying their employees in full, and can they claim back for the weeks prior? So the case has always been that you can't retrospectively claim it.
No, you can't.
No, that's correct.
Somebody's just asking, will there be a reconciliation process for Ewss?
No.
No.
Hopefully not. There's no requirement yet. No, Ewss, it's I should say it was a lot simpler scheme. Yeah, and the Ewss is a subsidy to the employer, not to the employee. So the employee may not even necessarily know that their employer is in receipt of Ewss. There's nothing to indicate that in terms of the employees. So no, and it's being taxed in the live environment. Like the employer is making normal gross wages to the employees. They're being taxed in the live environment, so there should be no requirement there for reconciliation on Ewss.
Yeah, which we're all delighted about.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jonathan, I know you have to go now, don't you?
Another 2 minutes.
Another 2 minutes, okay. Somebody's just saying, in theory, the reconciliation should only really involve the first phase, the transitional phase. Is this correct? So really, yes, it's for the most part, that's what it should be.
Yeah, unless there was a J9 leave date. If an employee left in the operational phase, if you remember back then,
Yes,
we couldn't really fix those. They were rejected, so we'd owe money on the operational phase where an employee might have left in the operational phase. So that's where, if there's anywhere we owe money, it's more likely there.
Perfect, thank you. This is a question for me and you, Paul. Just asking about the update that I suppose Rachel showed there. So just to confirm, yeah, it's to TWSS Payroll Manager 2020. So if you open up 2020, it will prompt you for that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. I'm just asking, regarding the extension of Ewss to June, what is the qualifying criteria now? Have the production dates been changed? So I don't think there's been any change to the criteria, has there?
Not since the extension to 30th of June, but from January, like, sorry, my dog is having a little fit there. From the criteria changed from January moving into the new year. So the base period is still back to 2019, and it's still 6 months projections to the end of June 2021 then. And obviously, as you're moving through the year, those actuals versus your projections are checked, as Paul said. Then if you're still under the 30% or over your 30% reduction, then you'll still qualify. But no, the base periods weren't changed with the extension beyond 31st March.
And it's important to do that exercise at the end of each month as well.
Yeah, very important, yeah. I mean, obviously we've been in lockdown level 5 now for the last, what, 3, well, feels like forever, but there may not have been a lot of trade for people, so they're probably still within that eligibility, but as soon as it does start lifting, you know, it is very important to carry out that exercise.
Perfect. Somebody's just asking, where do they find the CSV file on BrightPay? So just if you go to employees, you'll have an option there for reconciliation CSV file. And we will be releasing an upgrade just to show that total figure. Sorry, just trying to, I don't know, Jonathan, I know you have to go anyway.
Yeah, I just told him I can stay on till 10 to now, yeah.
Okay. A lot of people just querying, I suppose, the subsidy paid to employees versus the subsidy payable. So I think the guidance is really coming through there, just to, I suppose, read and understand what, there's a lot of terminology and it's quite similar, just to understand what they mean.
It is all broken out. There's tables within that guidance, and it is all broken out what they actually mean. The subsidy paid is the amount paid over to the employer. The subsidy payable is under the rules of the scheme what should have been payable to the employee then. But it's all broken out there. Explains everything.
I suppose, Audrey, just going back to the transitional period, the payroll would have been prompting as to, you know, what the subsidy paid should have been. I suppose in some cases, maybe people might have overrode that, or subsequently the information for January and February, which, you know, calculates the AR and WP, might have changed due to corrections or whatever. So that's where there would probably be differences between the payable and paid.
Yes. Somebody's just saying, I think they'll have to contact you, but that they received a letter stating the amount of Twiz that was paid to them, but the Twiz reconciliation summary shows a different Twiz paid figure. So I presume they just have to make contact with revenue on that one.
Yeah, just make the content or check the CSV download compared to their own record and make sure that, you know, that is what they uploaded, because that's what the reconciliation is based on. Sorry, Jonathan, I cut across you there.
Oh, that's. So I was going to say the same, yeah.
Yeah.
A few comments just from people that I suppose are due to make an income tax return, and it's affecting their access to the end of year statement, or their spouse if they're jointly assessed. I suppose looking for advice there, but I suppose they're really just not available, and it would have to be a best estimate, I think, to calculate the tax and USC due there.
for income tax. There should be some information or some detail on the website, particularly for joint assessed cases. So have a look there. I'm not overly familiar myself now, but I do remember trying to find some information there on our website about it.
No, and yeah, we're employer focused at the moment for this, and I see a question there as well about the about proprietary director. Can they offset the Twiz liability against their presumably earned income credit? Good question. Hadn't really considered it, but I'll have to have a look at the legislation. That there's nothing precluding that, and we can get back to you on it.
Perfect. Somebody's just asking again where that report is on Thesaurus. So just on Thesaurus 2020, under the reports menu, you have Twiz reports, a TWSS report.
I think just in relation to directors, Audrey, just you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that you know, the way the employer can pay the liability for in relation to tax liability, it's USC liability for the subsidy, that's not available to proprietary directors, I believe.
Yeah, I don't think it was in the guidance, but when the question came up on a revenue call, yeah, it did say that it couldn't be paid for them. I think we've got some people that are jointly assessed as the other spouse that their employer is willing to pay it, but it's just how to work out how much is due.
Yeah.
I think we've covered most of what's there. There is a lot of repeat questions, and some of them, I suppose, are quite specific, whereby I think they need to contact revenue, you know, to discuss the scenario themselves.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions there as well that can be answered off from the guidance as well. You know the terminology, how do you upload a CSV file? There's full documents about that as well, and the options. And they're still coming in thick and fast, but I think we've tried to cover off as many as we could.
As much as we can.
Yeah.
Great, so yeah, I'll jump in here again. So thanks a million, Audrey, for managing the questions and answers. And a massive thank you again to Karen and Jonathan for joining us for today's webinar. It was great to have you on board today. We will send out a follow-up email to everyone later today with a link to the recording of the webinar and a copy of the presentation slides as well, so you can watch it back again in your own time if you missed any of the questions, or if you want to look back to see what was said. So yeah, I'd like to thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, and we hope you found it useful. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks very much for having us.